Arundhati, move that chair from your background also. Yeah.
Okay. Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 18th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward through a massive outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, The People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 18 of the Mahotsav with the Indian pangolin as the species in focus and the Nandankanan Biological Park as the zoo in focus. Joined in today to speak to us on the species is Dr. Manoj Nair. Dr. Nair is an Indian Forest Service officer of the 2001 batch, Odisha cadre. He has done his post-graduation in wildlife science from the Wildlife Institute of India and has over 2 decades of experience in research and management of forest and wildlife. His interests lie in enhancing welfare and capacity of frontline staff in protected areas, undertaking biological expeditions for multi-taxa surveys, mobilizing conservation action through community participation, and understanding emerging trends in captive animal management. He has received various accolades during the course of his career and is currently serving as a Senior Deputy Director of the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie. He will speak to us on the Indian pangolin. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Arundhati. And it's good to see Sonali, Manoj, and I'm sure quite a lot of friends as well. First of all, let me congratulate and thank the Central Zoo Authority for organizing this absolutely wonderful series of talks. Extremely informative, and I think it really does enhance the awareness of a lot of people. I'm very thankful for you for having given me this opportunity to talk about a very less known species, the Indian pangolin. I'll start sharing the video now. I'm sorry, the screen now. Is it visible, Arundhati?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, that's nice. Well, so I'll start the presentation, and if you notice the subtitle, it's about the Indian pangolin, of course, but I call it an enigma in Indian natural history. So right at the outset, I should start with a disclaimer saying that, I'm by no means an expert on the species. And all that I have to claim by way of expertise is that in the last about probably 30 years of walking around in the forests, various forests of India, I must have seen it less than 10 times in the wild. But I was very lucky to be part of, this incredible group of people who have been engaged in conservation and captive breeding of the Indian pangolin in Nandankanan when I was part of the zoo management there, and also very briefly in the Assam State Zoo when I was posted there for a very short time. So that's all the claim of expertise that I have. So the Indian pangolin is a very ancient lineage of mammals, quite an old mammalian offshoot, very elusive and absolutely mysterious. So, I mean, the Latin name itself, Manus crassicaudata, itself sort of pays homage to the fact that it's almost wraith-like, it's almost ghost-like. Manus in Latin actually means, denizen of underworld, or you can call it a ghost. And interestingly, so little is known about this species that I was really wondering as to how to fill up this 20 minutes given to me. So the word pangolin comes from, interestingly, a Malay word, pangolin, which means one who can roll up. So it's just a single species, a single order, a single family, and eight species all across the world. And it's primarily an old world tropical animal, both in the tropics of Asia as well as Africa. So you have 4 species in Asia and 2 species each in sub-Saharan Africa. India, of course, has 2 species, as most of us would know. The Indian pangolin, which is widely distributed across Indian peninsula, and the Chinese pangolin, which is found in northeastern India. We'll come to the details of distribution a while later. But given the fact that it's an animal about which a lot of us know quite less, and until very recently that also included me, is that in reality it's a very, very shy and harmless animal, despite the fact that it may look very threatening to a lot of people. In fact, during my discussions with a lot of young people, a lot of people who haven't really seen a live pangolin, they conjure up images of this huge, monstrous creature which is armor plated and which can literally tear you to shreds, at the very sight of you. But the reality, of course, is very, very different. Despite the fact that it's an armored animal, because it's got very large scales covering their skin, and unfortunately, that has led to the undoing of the species because of this completely unfounded and mistaken belief that the scales possess some kind of medicinal property, and is very widely used in traditional Chinese medicine all across Southeast Asia. But it's in reality, as I told you earlier, a very, very shy and totally harmless animal, toothless, almost completely nocturnal, and dwelling in burrows. It spends a lot of time in digging and living inside burrows, and feeds exclusively on ants and termites, almost exclusively on ants and termites. And also, interestingly, this is how, you can look at the picture. This is how most of you would have seen a pangolin. And this is when, it feels threatened and it rolls up into a sort of impregnable ball, which is a fantastic defensive adaptation against a lot of predators. And it's also curious that, the young often ride on the back or on the tail of the adults. And again, a small interesting bit of trivia. A pangolin can consume about 20,000 ants per day, apparently. I don't know who actually brought out this piece of statistic, but I'm sure it must be a daunting task. So if you look at the distribution, as I told you, the Indian pangolin is the one which is marked in yellow in the legend. It's there almost everywhere in the Indian subcontinent, actually, not just in India. So it extends into Pakistan to the west, all along Nepal, southern Bhutan, extends into part of Bangladesh as well, and then in Sri Lanka. And the the Chinese pangolin is the one which is shown in the right of the map. So it starts distribution. It occurs all across northeastern India and continues all the way into Southeast Asia to Sundaland and so on. Interestingly, Indian pangolin is, I would call it as a habitat generalist, actually. Because, if you look at the distribution, it occurs right across a huge variety of habitat types, right from tropical evergreen forest to the Western Ghats in Sri Lanka, all the way to, all through peninsular India, the dry deciduous, the moist deciduous forests, and even semi-arid areas. So it's got a very, very wide ecological spectrum in terms of its habitat. But interestingly, despite being a habitat generalist, it's a diet specialist. So it's got a very specialized feeding niche, and that's because of its obligatory myrmecophagous habit, that is the habit of feeding on ants and termites. So, often a question which is often asked is how do you distinguish between an Indian and a Chinese pangolin? So, to make it very simple, you can look at the table, of course, but to make it very simple, Indian pangolin is a much larger, yellowish brown animal with larger scales and lesser scale rows. Whereas the Chinese is a smaller, darker animal with a larger number of scales. And when you handle a pangolin up close, or if you able to see it very close in the zoo, you can notice that the Chinese has a very obvious and a more prominent pinna, the earlobe. whereas it's much reduced in the Indian. There are there are very many technical differences which I will not go into detail about. But I think the easiest way to tell whether it's an Indian or a Chinese is where you get it from or where you have seen it from. So if it's peninsular India or the major chunk of India, it has to be Indian. If it's northeastern India, it has to be Chinese. But if you're from a place like, let's say, extreme western Assam or some parts of Bangladesh, I mean, it can be tricky because uh, both the species are known to occur there, but I really doubt how substantiated those claims are, because I've never seen an Indian pangolin anywhere in the Northeast, nor seen photographs in the recent past. So coming to basic biology, it's people must be wondering how large they can grow. So on an average, it is about 10 to 15 kilograms in weight, an adult Indian pangolin. Something like about a meter and a half in length, including the tail. But there are exceptional individuals which have grown much larger. So this is something interesting among pangolins. They show a lot of variation between individuals, so that it's not very easy to standardize and find out an equation which can correlate the length and the age. So the longevity is quite unknown in the wild. We really do not know how long they live in the wild. But in captivity, they have been known to live about 20 plus years. Sexually dimorphic because the male is distinctly larger than the female, and they're very slow breeders, producing about on an average about 1 to 3 offsprings every 2.5 years. They breed throughout the year. Sexual maturity is at 2 years, and the female gives birth normally to one, almost as a rule one, but then very few cases where two have been recorded. And if I remember correctly, that's from Pakistan. The young are very tiny. I mean, it's really interesting to see a young pangolin. Very soft scales when they're young, which the scales graduate thickly. And then it can suckle up to 4 months, but about a month, when they're about a month old, they can start feeding on ants. And interestingly, all this information is largely derived from this captive breeding center in Nandankanan, and meticulous work carried out by Dr. Manoj Mahapatra and his team. So getting good quality natural history information about the pangolin from the wild is almost impossible. But I'm very happy to say that efforts have already been initiated. So if you look at the behavior in the social organization, it's largely a solitary animal and nocturnal. So it's just in the night that they move about, and also fossorial, which means that they are burrowing animals literally. So Indian pangolin is largely terrestrial, but they're also known to climb. I think the southern population have a propensity to climb more, and that's what even the tribal people in the south have told me, specifically the Kani tribals who hunt them a lot. And if you see a pangolin walk, it's very interesting. It's got a very shuffling gait, because it's probably very unique among animals in the sense that the 4 feet, and it places the 4 feet differently and hind feet differently, in the sense that the 4 feet, it walks with its knuckles really. It's got very long claws in the 4 feet, adapted to sort of ripping open formicarius and termitariums. But when it walks, that's not an impediment, because it folds it inside and walks on its knuckles, the 4 feet. But the hind feet is plantigrade, which means it keeps the pad on the ground. So when you see a pangolin track, which not many people know, it leaves a very curious mark, actually, which is quite diagnostic if you see it close, but then we'll come to it later. And a pangolin, believe it or not, can even swim in times of need. I mean, that was news to me. I've never seen a pangolin swim, nor have I tried to make it swim, actually. And interestingly, very little is known about its vocalization and communications. It hardly makes a noise. It's an absolutely silent animal, except when you handle a freshly caught pangolin. It can produce a very, I would say, very startling hissing noise. And they have a habit of rolling up into a ball when disturbed. And at times, they're also known to produce a very foul-smelling liquid from the anal glands. This is not to be confused with the smell of the excreta, which is often found on animals which are stressed, rescued animals. they have this typical foul smell, but that's how they excrete. If you handle a fresh, a calm, and a used to pangolin in captivity, you can get a subtle smell, which is very different from the smell that you get when you handle a rescued individual. So, and we know very little about the behavior and social organization in the wild as of now. And diet, as I already told you, it's almost exclusively myrmecophagous, which means that it feeds on ants and termites and their larvae. It's largely the eggs and the young ones that they prefer. So they are supposed to have very good sense of olfaction. So they smell out live, active termitoriums and ant nests, ant hills, and they break it open, and then they use a long, very long protrusible tongue, which is very sticky. It's got a very gel-like substance coating it, and you'll be amazed at the number of ants that it can literally scoop it up actually using its tongue. And it also uses the tongue to lap water and drink. As we had mentioned earlier, it's largely terrestrial across most of India, but in parts of Sri Lanka and in southern Western Ghats, they can also be arboreal because there are a lot of arboreal termites and also arboreal ants there. And interestingly, in Nandankanan, as Manoj would tell you later, the diet largely comprises of an arboreal ant, the red fire ant or the red tree ant, Oikophila smaragdina. So I think ants comprise a major lot of their diet. And recent studies from Pakistan has indicated that the diet is largely composed of one genus actually, a very common ant genus called Camponotus. A lot of you might know it actually, small black ants. Okay, now coming to the natural history part. See, as a really active naturalist who really love finding out more and more about animals in the wild, I have found the pangolin to be a very, very difficult customer to deal with because you hardly see it at all. For one, it's totally nocturnal, it's fossorial and silent. I mean, what do you do? So less said the better. It's an extremely cryptic animal, and that also reflects in the fact that you hardly have any good quality information of the animal from the wild. But I think if one is a very discerning naturalist, and of course in the right area, there are a few clues by which you can make out the presence of a pangolin in that area. Tracks, as I told you, pangolins leave very, very unique tracks. But unfortunately, even some of our most seasoned of staff fail to recognize pangolin tracks because they're so rare, and the same goes with the droppings. Of course, the droppings can be seen at places, particularly near live burrows. And if you take it up, if you tease it apart, you can see a large number of ant remains, both sometimes the intact head itself or the chitinized exoskeleton of termites and ants. But for some reason, they are not common at all. One doesn't really come across pangolin tracks in the wild, nor droppings in the wild. And I have a hypothesis that pangolins are known to bury their or sort of cover their droppings with earth and with leaf litter. And I have a feeling that they avoid using specific, well cleared out trails, forest paths, or roads. Of course, you see them crossing roads, and that's how one often sees pangolins, specifically in the night, by the light of your Jeep when they cross roads. But otherwise, they keep to, I think, quite interior of forest area. Not in the sense that they avoid trails. Burrows is another very good way of detecting them. They make this. There are two kinds of burrows: the feeding burrows or the feeding signs, and the living burrows are the burrows in which they inhabit. Very nicely made, rounded burrows with. And if you observe carefully, the dorsal aspect of which will be smooth because of the scales. And in and around, you can see pangolin tracks if it's occupied, and also the fact that the signs of scales at times. But the feeding signs are of very many kinds, and unfortunately, it can be very easily confused with that of other animals which feed on termitoriums and termites, including the sloth bear. So sloth bear also can have a variety of feeding signs, and it's not very easy to say for certain that one is made by a pangolin or a sloth bear. Same thing with other evidences that are left. Often you see these marks of claw marks on trees. So I have heard many times tribal people telling me that they belong to pangolins, but I've always doubted because it's not easy to it's actually tell apart a pangolin scratch mark on a tree bark from that of, let's say, a young sloth bear or even a large varanus for that matter. Actually, although there are some subtle differences. So what I wanted to highlight is that for a naturalist, pangolin is a very challenging species to study about. A little bit about pangolins and humans because it's a fascinating animal and a very mysterious one. A whole range of legends and folk tales and stories have grew around them, and it would take another separate talk to talk about how pangolins are dealt with in Indian tribal societies and culture. But interestingly, in many places, it's viewed with fear and amazement among people when they come out of forest areas and venture into villages and so on. Sometimes, because lack of absolute knowledge, they're even brutally killed. But across India, I must sadly tell you that the meat is highly priced. All across tribal communities. I'm yet to come across a tribal community which does not consider the pangolin meat as a delicacy, which is unfortunate. But then that is not the real threat. In fact, pangolins have been dealing with meat-eating local communities for a long time. The actual threat, along with hunting for meat and also to an extent habitat modification, has been the threat from targeted collection for trade. I shall not go into the detail. I'm sure it would be dealt with in other forums as well. But unfortunately, pangolin is the most heavily trafficked species across the world, and it has even become a symbol of the noxious nature of wildlife trade across the world. So much so that both the species are now have become really, really rare in the wild, very rare. IUCN classifies the Chinese pangolin as critically endangered and the Indian pangolin as endangered. Of course, both are there in the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, which gives it the highest possible legal protection in India. And it's also included in the CITES Appendix 1. In fact, all pangolins are included in CITES Appendix 1. So interestingly, I think the recent past, a lot of very excellent work has been done by several state forest departments, painstakingly trying to delve into trade syndicates, etc., etc. And I have come across some recent cases where a very careful scanning of social media networks have unearthed massive pangolin trade, and that also includes some cases from Odisha. So real appreciation and kudos to all the frontline staff and officers in the field trying their best to target this wildlife crime. So what's the way forward? I think as a naturalist, I think the first thing to do is to know more about animal in the wild. We absolutely know next to nothing. So the frontline staff, forest staff need to be really trained to detect pangolin evidence. It's not difficult, but it should be done. And not just in PS, but also in territorial protected areas, because pangolins obviously don't recognize borders of wildlife forest divisions. More research possibly and done with high-end tools like telemetry and monitoring burrows with IR trap cameras. Not difficult to do. I think it should be done. I think the first attempts have been made in MP when the forest department have radio tagged pangolins, 2 of them, if I'm not wrong, in Satpura, if I remember correctly. Similarly, concerted efforts to tackle illegal wildlife trade, as I told you earlier, and as many awareness drives as possible, like the one which CZA is doing right now. And of course, unfortunately, husbandry in captivity is not easy at all for pangolin, one of the most difficult species to keep, manage, and breed in captivity. Manoj will talk about it later. But I feel that more zoos, Nandankanan is obviously the coordinating zoo, but I have a feeling that there is scope for more zoos to come in and establish similar breeding programs. Follow it up with a proper soft release and an eventual release breeding program, so that we can establish protocols very, very clearly. It might be needed in future. I think that's all I have to talk about it. I have exceeded my time limit by a minute, and sorry for that. I think that's it. Thank you so much. I'll leave the floor open to questions, or we'll take it together once Manoj finishes his talk. Thanks.
Yes. So, sir, we'll take questions for the session towards the end of the session, and and request you to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. So now we move on to the second part of today's session, which is the Know Your Zoo. So joined in today to speak to us on the zoo is Mr. Manoj Mahapatra, Mr. Manoj is a zoologist by training and has worked for the government of Odisha in various capacities across protected areas and zoos. He has done courses in wildlife and zoo management from the Wildlife Institute of India, and he began his career as an assistant conservator of forests in Hariyar Forest Division, and has since then risen through the ranks as the in charge regional CCF with additional charge as the director Nandankanan Biological. Apart from management, he has also undertaken designing of special enclosures post the super cyclone. Today, he will speak to us on the zoo and its history and the conservation breeding program. Over to you, sir. Sir, please unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Arundhati. I thank Mr. Manoj Nair for his excellent habitat and the naturalistic population of pangolin. I will just brief about the Nandankanan Zoo, then specifically on the conservation breeding program. Way back in 1960, the Nandankanan Zoo was established with the Garden of Gods. The 18th week celebration started with our Lord Jagannath festival, Rath Yatra. And I hope Lord Jagannath keeps our zoo safe and healthy. Earlier, it was established for sake of entertainment, but of late it has changed into education, conservation breeding, and ex situ and in situ conservation measures. The research and education program has been there in the zoo, and it has upgraded with sanction of biologists and zoo educators. It is in the state of Odisha, in the eastern coast, having a large area as a zoological park, a smaller botanical garden, with a very big 50-hectare Kanjia Lake, a large natural water body in the Mahanadi floodplains. Actually elicited as a housing of animals, which was sent for agriculture fair in New Delhi. This became a zoo, initially named as Nandankanan Biological Park, and after in 1982 it was renamed as Nandankanan Zoological Park. Subsequently, again the botanical park was brought back to the administrative control of Forest Department, and it is now treated as a biological park. It was also declared as a sanctuary with its surrounding areas in 1979 under the Wildlife Protection with a total area of 4.37 square kilometer. This includes both zoological park, botanical garden, and Kanjia Lake. That's it. Presently, about 160 species of more than 3,850 animals in 213 natural enclosures are exhibited here. It is a zoo of its uniqueness because free living tigers have entered into the zoo to remain in captivity. Probably no other zoo must have this record in the world. It is the first zoo in the country to become a member of the World Association of Zoos and Aquarium. It has got the largest pool for housing gharials and hippopotamus. The second largest heronry for open bill stock is a natural population. They make this heronry for decades, since decades, and it is a host zoo for white tigers. And the white tiger born to the natural parents in 1980. Today, maybe any zoo you go in the world has a white tiger. Possibility that it's best to the Nandankanan. The gharials breeding started in 1980 and has been successful. In the current year, a natural breeding of gharials has been seen in Mahanadi area, which is one of the natural habitat for gharials. Incidentally, Odisha got all the three crocodiles, Magar, estuarine crocodile, as well as gharial. And all the three populations are in the growth mode. And the conservation of the reptilians, particularly crocodiles, has been a great success for the wildlife officers of the state. Situated in a natural forest of semi-evergreen and moist deciduous forest, having a biodiversity of 725 species of plants. The Kanjia Lake was declared as a wetland of national importance in 2006. And incidentally, the melanistic tiger was born in captivity in the year 2014. The first of its kind was seen in Similpal Tiger Reserve, but captive born started in 14. And now the Central Zoo Authority has considered as a conservation breeding center for the mouse deer, Indian pangolin, and long-billed vulture. The mouse deer, Regulus mamina, and Indian pangolin has been very successful. But for the purpose of vultures, it is yet to see a great success. There is an aquarium which was declared in 2018 and having 75 species of fishes and invertebrates which are displayed there. We have a safari. The first safari was the lion safari in 1984, over 20 hectares. Then in 1991, it was a white tiger safari, exclusively having white tiger. We have abundant white tiger population. 3 to 4 white tigers are used to be released in this safari. We have a herbivore safari established in 2011 over an area of 21 hectares where spotted deers and other small deers are released. Bear safari was established in 2012 over an area of 4.1. Mostly sloth deers are exhibited there. There is a walk-through aviary which has got mostly fawners, pheasants, and ducks, sparrows, Java sparrow, budgerigar, finch, etc. It is in an open area where the children enjoy the most this area. We have a open top leopard enclosure with a big banyan tree inside. It is a visitor's most viewed enclosure. We have a nocturnal animal house where you put these nocturnal animals, and daytime the diurnal exhibits are very good and people enjoy, particularly the civet cats. They are a big attraction. The reptile park has 30 species: crocodiles, iguanas, lizards, tortoise, snakes, and all the 3 crocodile species are exhibited there. Even caimans are also kept there. We have an interpretation center at the entrance where visitor can see the glory of Nandankanan, the past history of Nandankanan, and the present exhibits. Then there is a museum where we have kept some of the old zoo's trophy animals, and one will go reminiscence to the history of the zoo, which was established since 1960. There is a live feed rearing center where we develop this white rats. Then we have got these air drums, because procuring feed from outside, which may be contaminated, we provide this feeding center for providing an organic, safe feed to our animals, particularly the young ones. We have got an exclusively slaughterhouse where the animals, live animals, are brought, converted into meat to provide to the large carnivores and some of the smaller carnivores. We have a large fodder farm where there is a vermicompost unit. It has got more than 10 subunits. Rotationally, we take out this vermicompost and apply to our fodder farm, which extends over 33 acres. And we generate more than 4 species of grasses, 2 species of millets, maize, and hybrid crops, which are fed to the zoo animals. And the zoo is self-sufficient in providing fodder to its animals. For the visitor entertainment, we have got a toy tent, recently renovated with a battery-operated electric powered engine and bogies, with a 1.5 kilometer round circular track. It runs along the lake, which is a beautiful scene. This is the boating facility on the Kanjia Lake, spreading over 50 hectares of area. The lawns and gardens, particularly in winter, comes to a bloom, and it is a sight to be seen. Both the zoological garden particular has varieties of flowers. The visitor amenities are lot many, as in many of the zoos, but the location are very unique, and we provide safe drinking water at every corner. We have a library where students, researchers, they come and refer and read. We have got amenities thinking about a kiosk. For the physical challenged people, we have got BOVs as well as wheelchairs, and the entry is free. And we have got ramps for the easy movement as well as to the in the park. Then we have got a Jew veterinary hospital. We have got 2 doctors around the clock, and they ensure the hygiene and the health of the animals. The belief is that if you provide adequate nutrition, then the healthcare is much better, and they ensure a hygienic diet to the animals. All the food that is received by the zoo are inspected by the veterinarians. They prepare the feed chart and ensure a nutrition diet for all the animals. And incidentally, as you know, the zoo has big problem of a parasite load in the animals. So periodically, there is a evaluation of pest population from the stool, blood, urine, and it accordingly the protocols are developed and treated. We have a Center for Wildlife Health Services in the Odisha Veterinary College. As and when we require specialized support, they are come to our desk. The Zoo Veterinary Hospital has got its own operation theatre and all the gadgets. The latest type of veterinary treatment can be extended to the animals. Yes. The uniqueness of Nandankanan is exhibited. Now coming to the Indian Pangolin Conservation Body. When way back in 98, when I was posted in Nandankanan, they saved 2 to 3 pangolins came as rescued ones. One was seized, second has gone into somebody's house, and another was just crossing over the road. And at that time, I have never seen a pangolin in nature or in captivity. And it was kept in a small place. One of them escaped in the overnight. It burrowed through the soil and escaped. And second one has got a fever. So then when he inspected that, we never knew that these pangolins could have so much of ectoparasite between their scales. The armor, which is for its safety, it becomes the biggest hindrance when there is a parasitic load, ectoparasites on its body. They take out a lot of nutrient from its body, make them weak, and also infect with the bacterial infection so that the pangolins die. Incidentally, 2 of the pangolins which were captured were female and they gave birth to young ones. Then we're stupefied to see that there is some small one, very thinly scaled and moving on the back of the thing. And during that period, mother never come out. And then we know that we can think of doing something for them, housing them. So there was an enclosure where but RCC floor and it was kept there. But whatever facility was there, it was never breeding in that enclosure. Then because of the and public awareness, more pangolins started being captured and brought to the zoo. Because this has become a center for rescue and of many animals in the state. So then a plan came out that we should have something for a breeding. And a super cyclone in 1999 gave us a way. Because at that time, many of the last trees in the periphery area were devastated. There was scarcity of food. So something has to be given an alternate because these animals, as Mr. Manoj has said, their niche is very small and they only take tree termites or tree ants. So to prepare food which is with the egg white, hard boiled egg white with amul, make it granulated so that it can have a rich protein diet. And we succeeded in that. The animals also accepted it. And this problem of providing around 300 grams of termite or ant eggs was substituted by this activity. And once the nutritional part is taken care of, then the housing was also planned. We have seen that animal is a burrowing animal, takes out sandy loam soil. So we filled up the enclosure with that sort of a soil. And in a year or two, we started that it is breeding. And a formal breeding center was conceptualized in Nandankanan Zoo. Today, we have got two different centers for the conservation breeding. And we are still improving on the facilities that we have developed. Actually, out of the 8 species of pangolin, the one which is there in our state, the only pangolin which we have with us, and it is the bee that you see in the is the one is highly nocturnal, elusive, and most important is that during the breeding time, it mostly remains in the burrow. So I have seen in nature pangolins moving into the tree with their claws, but they are very comfortable in burrowing. And incidentally, the only way to see a pangolin is there when you find some of the soil or the soft soil that is very nearby. And if there is a nearby dormitorium is there and there is a flow around, then possibility is that is the place where pangolin will be there. In my field posting in Khordha division, one child was sent into this what you call this hole, burrow, to capture a pangolin. And this fellow was dragged out. And this is how they capture. In nature, they capture the pangolin by identifying a particular burrow and sending a small child with a rope, get into the burrow and capture it. But once it is outside, it is very easy because it calls around, anybody can put it in a carry bag and shift it. Though locally it is neither hunted for meat or for the scale, but scale has got a very big market. And as Mr. has told, that maybe it is the largest traded animal because neither it makes a noise nor makes a what you call it, easy to put it in a bag or a gunny bag. Once it is coiled, it remains motionless. And in Nandankanan Zoo, this has been exhibited since 1962, but the first birth was seen in 1971. If you look at the head of the animal, it is a small and cone shaped, very small eyes, which is protected with thick eyelids because it is burrowing into the soil. It has got a thick eyelid. The long muscular tongue, unless you see one, you cannot imagine that it has got such a long. It passes within a second and catches hundreds of ants in it. By adhesion, by the glutinous thing it has got in its tongue. About 19 years the longevity in the pot, maybe around in our center it is around 21 years, if it is unrecorded. But naturally, it must be much less in the nature. Mostly it is a single animal, solitary, and gestation period is about 60 days. 8 to 9 months. 8 to 9 months period. Mostly there is a single baby, rarely two. And the youngs are carried on the mother's tail or in the back, which is very fascinating. And when you disturb the female with the young will coil to a safe around the house. And you can only see the young ones on the belly. The establishment of Conservation Breeding Center started in 2008, which was funded by the Central Zoo Authority. And today we have got around 26 numbers of pangolins in the zoo. The red weaver ant, Oikophilus smaragdita, which facilitated the long-term survival of the species. Actually, the ecological role of this pangolin would have been they control the pest population of termites and ants. Because the amount of termites they eat, maybe a few pangolin in area is going to control the termite mounds population so that their pest activity is reduced. All pangolins in the captive breeding are microchipped with a passive integrated transponder, specific ID for individual identification. And you can take a reader and know that which species, because there is not much of a sexual dimorphism or any marking on the scale doesn't last long, this is the best way for identification. The behavior of the pangolins are recorded with infrared sensitive CCTV cameras during the night time as pangolins strictly nocturnal. Till now, 2 young ones have taken birth and growing well in this special designed enclosure. And actually, this, as Mr. Manoj Nair has told earlier, this infrared things can be very good. You can put it into a particular prospective burrows to see whether an animal is there or not. To develop housing conservation breeding protocols, it is still in the evolving stage, and we're improving on the exhibit houses, drainages, and providing what you call occupational exercise for the animals and enclosure enrichment. Till date, we have got 10 pangolins which have been taken birth at the Conservation Breeding Center. The founder stock was 6 Indian pangolin in 2008. Sexing has been done. Present stock is 8 male, 17 female in 1 on 6, total 26. We have a rearing system. Rear of rescued young pangolins whenever it comes to a zoo, rescued at about 1 month old, hardly 140 gram weight, fed with Royal Canin baby dog milk, kept in keeper's room in close observation, feed 6 times per day. Because as in nature also is found, it suckles the mother very frequently. Immediate veterinary assistance was as and when required. Vitamin supplements were provided. Fecal examination deworming is maintained. So actually, the pangolin is highly prone to infestations, both ectoparasite and endoparasite. They have to regularly monitor for this, otherwise they become weak and won't live long. Nandankanan is among the 6 participating zoos for conservation breeding of long-billed vulture designed by the CZA. The vulture conservation program, breeding program, Pinjore, Haryana is the coordinating zoo for the said purpose and has provided the population. With the finance support from Central Zoo Authority, Nandankanan initiated the planned conservation breeding for long-billed vulture since 2018 in an off-exhibit area. This is the exhibit area, and we have got this population in our birds in our center. Now coming to the research and education program, the research on ecto and endoparasite of captive animals funded by CZA is on. The feline panleukopenia to prevent infection in big cats, microchipping of endangered species for identification, celebration of Tiger Day on 29th of July, celebration of Wildlife Week on 1st week of October, Elephant Day on 12th of August, birthday of naming of tiger cubs is a big celebration in this zoo. World Wetland Day on the 2nd February, Gono Mahotsav, the Foundation Day, Saturday of February month, World Wildlife Day on 3rd March, World Environment Day 5th June, and World Veterinary Day 20th April. These are the few of the occasions we celebrate. You can have a photo picture of that, and we award people for this. This is the other part of the zoo, which is called the State Botanical Garden, which was established in 1963. And earlier it was managed by the State Horticulture Department. It has got a beautiful gardens, landscapes, and one must see to believe its richness. Next. If you look at the botanical garden, there are so many things. We've got a butterfly plug, Japanese garden, rose garden, glass house, dry garden, palm garden, cacti house. Even we have got these carnivorous plants. And if you look at this landscape, you can understand how beautiful it is. Just behind there is a lake, and you have got these gardens. The cactus house is one of the largest in our state. The lake, which is a national wetland, it was declared in 2006 by MOF, is actually a rich biodiversity. Its wetland population has been already studied, and it has got 66 acres of area, including its water spread area. The management interventions includes water quality monitoring, wetland education, weed control, and improvement inlet and outlet. The drainage is the biggest problem for us. Now we have attended to that. I hope this one. This is the tiger, Kanan, which has entered from the wild and remained captive in one of the enclosure. Sorry about releasing captive animal into the wild, but here is an occasion where a wild animal has solicited to remain in captive, where there was a tigress in that enclosure. Thank you.
Right.
Any questions?
Yes. Sir, may I request you to first stop sharing the screen? Dr. Manoj?
Yes, Arundhati, I'm here.
Okay, sir, forest areas. Since it is such an elusive species, what kind of enumeration methods can be used by forest frontline to come to an assessment?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answers. But I think there are a few things that one can start with. Number one, just because the species is so less known, a lot of our frontline staff possible in their area. I think they have to be trained how to make out whether a burrow is occupied or not, to understand whether a I think I mean and perhaps exposure visits to how it walks, how it goes, what are the tracks like, what's the dropping like. I think that can make a lot of difference. So one, we have to generate a lot of data regarding the occupancy. Then we can go on to the next step and try and see what are the patterns of offtake, whether it is purely by like hunting for food by local tribal food intelligence network among the frontline staff and among the villages. Number three, actually, you can also employ technology, and this people have done it quite successfully in several places across the world, specifically in other parts of Javan pangolin, for instance, Palawan pangolin, for instance, and in Taiwan, a lot of studies. I mean, Rajesh would know about it actually. So, you might have a good idea about not only the occupancy, but also a bit about the activity pattern of the animal. And as Manoj said, during breeding, they hardly venture out of the burrow. So for long periods of time, they will be completely inside. So possibly use of endoscopes to look at whether a burrow is occupied and things like that. I think once these things are set in motion, there will be a general sort of, I would say, increase in awareness all across our. And I particularly emphasize the role of frontline staff, because they are ultimately, they are the people who walk day in and day out in our forest areas, and they would be the best possible people to try and tell us what needs to be done. So I think I'll give priority for pure and simple awareness of natural history of the animal. And of course, tracing illegal wildlife trade in a very, very constant manner, specifically for the pangolin. And how to do it is just like this, emphasize on basic natural history, use of technology, and number three, even you can have people who are specialized in pangolins. See, okay, one more thing, you still now in India we don't have a single PhD that has been done on the pangolin. Rajesh can correct me. In the wild. I think the first radio tags have been put on pangolins about a year back in MP, and it's a matter of pride that it's MP Forest Department which did that. And they're monitoring the animals in Satpura. So that's a very good start. The MP has always led wildlife management protocols along with Odisha, and I think we should try and test all these things in a lot of states. Sorry for the long answer.
No problem, sir. So the next question for you is that, in your opinion, which species, the Chinese or the Indian pangolin, is more threatened? Being a diet specialist, what kind of conservation methods would be required in our forest? What would you suggest?
Okay, it's a slightly nuanced question and not straightforward, because the range of Indian pangolin is just the Indian subcontinent, whereas the Chinese pangolin extends far into Southeast Asia. And what has happened is that if you look at the IUCN categorization, the Chinese pangolin is critically endangered. Okay, and the Indian pangolin is just endangered. Although there are submissions for revision that is periodically being submitted to IUCN, but the fact remains is Chinese pangolin is much more threatened, for the simple fact that it's closer to the centers of active trade. Because it's far. I mean, Southeast Asia is everything is wiped out. I mean, you just cannot realize the level of offtake that happens in Southeast Asia. So Chinese pangolin is much more threatened, according to me. Luckily, Indian pangolin survives in fairly good numbers in a lot of our protected area, and thanks to our frontline staff, it's quite well protected, despite occasional poaching incidents. So you have several large protected areas in India where Indian pangolin still survives. If you take the example of Odisha, I'm sure Simlipal has a decent population. Debrigad has a good population. Satkosia might be having good population, I'm not sure. But if you take other parts of India, fantastic, very good population all across the Western Ghats. Bandipur, Mudumalai, Nagarhole complex, Bandhavgarh, Kana, Gir. Gir is probably the best place to go and see pangolins or study them, according to me. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So I think those are the questions for you. And we now move on to the questions for the zoo. So, Mr. Manoj, the first question for you is that you seem to receive a lot of wild rescued Indian pangolins. What are the primary causes for such rescues? And what do you think should be done to create awareness and prevent hunting for bushmeat by tribal communities?
Actually, most of the pangolins were caught not for the bushmeat. Then that will never come live to us. It is basically for the trade. They keep it stored, and somebody informs us that this fellow has got a pangolin in his house. So we raided and captured them. It has happened in Moirvans in the Baleshwar district in this past. Basically, live pangolin which is rescued and brought is because of a seizure by the forest department. Very rarely, maybe around a decade before, sometimes pangolins found in the backyard of somebody's house. Some noise is there in the night, they get scared, and in the morning they found this animal is available. They do not know what to do with it. They inform the staff, then it is brought and rescued. Because nobody knows what it feeds, how can you feed it? So it is just for the forest department staff, field staff, and they brought it back to the zoo. So 99% of these rescued animals travels back to Nandankanan Zoo. And as regards this awareness program is there, we have got a pangolin day. But in the wildlife week, we go for competition, and there is a particular places where we found pangolins are there. We have to improve the VSS, Vanasuraksha Samitis. This particular animal is there. If anybody sees, please inform our local first section office. Actually, as Mr. Manoj Nair has told, no, if there is a borrow, we know, because local people who capture the pangolin, they know what is this sign. And after talking to a few of them, I knew if there is a big termite mound and there is a wider row nearby, then there is a possibility of a pangolin staying there. Because even the others, lizard, mountain lizard also do the same thing, occupy the same space, but the width of the burrow can be a and local areas where they once they kept pangolin, they know in and out about the pangolin where it will be available. So one thing is this awareness will help us to know at least which forest blocks or forest areas the pangolins are there. And wide publicity itself has its limitation, because once you put a marketing price on the pangolin, then more hunting will be there. So it has to be judiciously done, that this is too rare an animal. It is so good for us because it reduces the pest load of termites and ants, which we do not compete for our food. It should be allowed to survive in nature. This sort of a awareness, if it goes on, it will be nice. Otherwise, if it is promoted for bushmeat, then another few urban people also started thinking about it, and it is a provision for the meat. If you look at the Chinese system of medicine as well as in the Chinese market, you found this gets into as a pet trade. Somewhere it will go to a soup bowl, so somewhere the meat is also consumed. Luckily in India, it has not happened that way. It is basically for the scale it is being hunted. So the awareness program is definitely good, but that must be very selectively decided.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Arundhati, I just wanted to sort of supplement what Manoj just said. He made a very, very valuable, an extremely valuable point actually, and a very practical point. I have been seeing a lot of social media feeds, a lot of I would say press releases and so on, press conferences in which it's openly and very proudly said that, we have captured a pangolin which would cost about 20 lakh of rupees in international trade. Or the middleman was caught with something like a couple of lakh rupees with him. This is extremely damaging. We should not monetize it. We should not tell. I mean, it's not. The moment you have such such information going around. I mean, you take it from me, it will jack up the demand. It's a very simple thing, and it's not to be done at all. So I'm very glad that Manoj made this point. Very extremely important. We should not talk anything about the value of pangolin. We should talk about the value of pangolin for its ecological role, actually.
Yes.
I mean, how valuable the animal is and how rare it has become, and it's a harmless animal. So thanks, Manoj, for raising that point.
Thank you.
Okay, so coming back to the question answer, the second question for you is, what are the future plans for the Pangolin Conservation Breeding Center, and what kind of national and international collaboration support do you think would you require?
Actually, now the first priority is to build up a population. If you look at thinking of a in-situ conservation by releasing these animals, we need a large population. Even there is no protocol has not been decided as yet. And interestingly, this animal is a solitary animal. That doesn't mean that you just release one animal in one forest block and leave it. They may not be staying in a family group, but they need some sort of a communication. So, for making a viable population to breed in perpetuity and establish in a particular place, which will be ideal for them, have a sufficient food availability for them, it is a long-term planning. First is we should have a population, then we identify a habitat for them, and then once you release, we should monitor them for about a decade or 2 decades to see that the first generation, second generation started breeding there. Then we can think it is a success. So it is actually, we have just in the primary stage of doing what we call building up a population. And as you know, same population, if we have it may have a inbreeding coefficient. So we must have some other population, lateral population, male or female, so that the genetic diversity will be there. And rightly, Manoj has suggested that it has a distribution throughout the country. We can think of any forest area in our state or in neighboring state, but only consider will be it should have adequate food for them. Because now, because of the deforestation and the riverine areas getting dried up, maybe in future the food availability will be reduced, because in the last 3 decades before, we have got a lot many termite mounts in the sal forest. Visibly, that number has reduced. Maybe a recurrent fire, maybe because of the dry season is already extended for more than 4 or 5 months, or maybe climatic change. I don't know, but I apprehend that there will be a scarcity of natural food of this species. So that needs to be habitat restoration is required to be done. And you cannot plant anything a termitarium in any forest. It has to have a resource, it has to be cellulose so that it builds on its own. And this pangolin depends on those. So we have to think of areas where we can build a population, and conservation breeding will be a success when we think of in situ, extended to in situ. That's it. Thank you.
Yes. All right, sir. So those were the questions for you. And with this, we wrap up today's Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo seminar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the speakers, Dr. Manoj and Mr. Manoj, for taking time out of their busy schedules and joining us for this talk, and for sharing such enriching and knowledge and doing this knowledge sharing with us. I would also like to thank the audience for being patient and being with us throughout this journey. And I'd also like to inform that the Nandankanan Biological Park will be continuing the outreach activities to the 18th of July. So do tune into the social media pages. And the next week, that is on Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. we will be back with our week 19 Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk on the slot there with the Bhagwan Birsa Biological Park as the zoo and focus. So thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you to the speakers once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.